Hey guys, Greg Conley here with Dr. Mike Israetel talking about the psychology of dieting, and we're actually going to dive into one of the things we've just been chatting about that I find incredibly interesting, which is the backstory behind Renaissance periodization. And people don't put a lot of thought into both of those words, but they actually have very specific meanings that Mike was just telling us about. So we're going to dive a little bit into that, and then with periodization, probably go a little bit further into, how long you should be focused on losing fat in your diet, which is really the concept of periodization itself. So I guess to start, can you circle back and give us the backstory behind Renaissance, and then we'll dive into periodization, and we can kind of discuss that in depth.
Sure. I was on the streets of New York City where I met Nick Shaw, and I was actually trying to mug him at the time. And he's like, "How about we start a successful diet and training company instead?" And I said, "You know what? What's your name?" He said, "Nick." I'm Mike. Let's just do it.
Done.
That was it. On a serious note, so I've actually known Nick in undergraduate. We did undergrad together at Michigan. And then we both, so he was a couple of years behind me in school. We both finished up our degrees. I finished up my master's at Appalachian State, and then we both got a job at the same place at a training center in New York City. Mm-hmm. And we got to train a lot of finance folks. And super, super smart people, really cool people. And, at this time, Nick and I were kind of, developing into bodybuilders, building a lot of muscle, and we were always seeking out kind of sources of new information. And a lot of what we were getting was just like guru stuff, like mysticism. Like, oh, you should eat like this. This food will make you ripped. This other food won't. And we're just like, why?
The magic weight loss.
That's right, sure. And it was all about that. And it was all these characters, these people you had to know. They had all the answers. The answers were never formalized. There was no logic to any of this stuff. Some of it was just blatantly illogical. And we would try to get at the roots of this stuff, and it was all just kind of like mystery. And we got incrementally more pissed at that. We didn't like that. We were students of science at Michigan, and we loved the scientific approach. We loved clear, incrementally more true as you look into them closer answers. So with that being the backdrop of what we were starting to notice, and if we were ever going to get into the industry to try to help people ourselves, it was going to be through science. Mm-hmm. Because we were really, really, really tired of mysticism and all this guru stuff. So at this time, we're training folks, and economics is one of my personal hobbies, which is a weird hobby. I have a lot of friends. Okay, I have the books they don't want to hang on. Yeah. So I would always talk econ with the guys that I train, especially the finance guys. They have a lot to say. Mm-hmm. I asked them this and that. Like a lot of them are hedge fund managers, and so Nick and I would talk to them and ask them about stuff, and they'd talk econ, and they said, "Oh, our profit margins are like this. You don't really make much more than that unless you're Rentec. And we suffered after the crash a bit. You don't really bounce back like that unless you're Rentec." And I'm just like, "What the hell is Rentec? What do you guys keep talking about?" And they're like, "Look it up." I was like, okay, looked it up. So there's a company called Renaissance Technologies, and it is a hedge fund firm that trades a variety of monetary instruments. And the guy that started it is actually a former World War II code breaker. Mm-hmm. And he's like a curmudgeon old Jewish man that smokes a lot. He's a chain smoker, which, I've tried to chain smoking, but it hurts too much. So
that's not part of the diet.
That's right, I'll do that. I think he kind of got the same idea that we did in fitness much longer before in the finances, that I don't think it was really interesting to him to have gurus and stuff predicting which way the stock market was going to swing. Mm-hmm. And he was, to say that he was good at mathematics, he's actually formally published in mathematics. He has his own theorems named after him.
Oh, wow.
That's insane. Like the Simon's whatever theorem. It's just like nuts, right? So what they did at Renaissance Technologies was they went about making money in the stock market with essentially a purely quantitative approach. They hire a team of a ton of PhDs, which is very rare in finance, PhDs in chemistry and physics and mathematics, and they own computer science as well. Mm-hmm. And they basically have them develop, test, and tend to a variety of very, very high-level computer algorithms, and the machines do the trading. Mm-hmm. So it's all quantitative. They're not in the business of doing guesses and hunches. Mm-hmm. And when I heard that story, I was just like, oh my God, this is like a fairy tale. And if you look at their profitability year to year, it looks just absurd. It's like 30% growth every year from like 1980 or something like that. Mm-hmm. They had one down year ever, which was the stock market fumble in like 2007, 2008. And that was it. It was back to the same old, same old. Mm-hmm. You know, and they said something about like, we had to readjust the algorithms after that happened. But then everything was fine. You're just like, oh my God. And a bunch of other companies have tried to follow suit with, relative success. Most people have not reached that level, and it's very mysterious. When you're employed for them, you're not allowed to speak about anything you see in there as far as the algorithms and stuff, which makes sense. It would give up their advantage. But it was just so inspirational for myself and Nick to hear that there was this company that was unique in the fact that they just abandoned the guessing process altogether. Mm-hmm. They were like, let's just count all this stuff.
Yeah,
we can quantify it. We can use science and mathematics to get the right answers. And, in a much less impressive way, Nick and I have been trying to do that with Renaissance Periodization the entire time, is, we can't say we know the science, but we know a lot of it, and we're trying to learn more all the time. We know the things that can be quantified, things that can be exactly calculated, produce results. People who have a lot of internal wisdom and knowledge, they can make guesses and have hunches, but what they're really doing is using an informal amount of logic in their brains and then taking the guesses out of that. It's logic either way, it's math either way, it's science either way. So we wanted to formalize the science to figure out what it is that those gurus are guessing at, turn them into principles, turn them into equations, and use those equations and principles to actually design diets and training and all that stuff. And that's valuable in the fact that it produces much more surefire results. And also in the fact that when people ask us, so why are you doing it this way? We can say, this is exactly why we do it this way. One of the policies we have for all of our RP coaches, who are mostly PhDs, hint, a little throwback to that, if a client ever asks, why are we doing this? RP guarantee they will get as technical of an answer as they are looking for. We have a reason for absolutely everything. So that's how our company name came to be, and the process of logically executing training with a long-term goal is called periodization. So we took Renaissance, and in addition to that, what is the Renaissance concept altogether? So Renaissance period in human history is when, after the Dark Ages and all that stuff, there was this trend towards mysticism. Everything was supposed to be based in dogma. And science was really squashed for like 1,000 years or something like that. I mean, you have sort of the Greek and then Roman times when there was some looking into the logical underpinnings of the earth. And if you look at scientific and mathematical history in the Dark Ages, you literally just almost nothing happened for like 1,000 years. People stopped learning because they stopped basing their stuff on science and they started basing it on dogma. And the Renaissance was when people started opening up their minds again, writing things down, calculating again, and noting how the world actually worked. And to us, that and what did it lead to? It lead to every great thing that you know of. Every technology, air conditioning, helping you deliver a baby in a sterile hospital in which it's such a huge chance that everything's going to be okay. All the beautiful things in life, or many of them, caused by that kind of thinking. The end of that thinking is the ability to control all the variables you want to get the results you want. That's how we have the RP name, and that's our entire philosophy. Scientific precision, so that you don't have to guess. We hate guessing. We're tired. When people say I'm a guru, I don't like to hear that. I'm not a guru. I just know shit. But what I know is teachable to everyone. That's why I'm also a professor. There are no secrets at Renaissance. There are no secrets in the structure of the universe can be elucidated by mankind. You can't figure out how things work. If you like guessing and if you like hunches, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. We don't want our clients to make mistakes. We want them to have results. So we use as much precision, scientific calculation as we can.
Yeah, and in that way, I feel like it's literally the perfect name for what you guys are doing, because, I mean, even prior to 1950, there was virtually no study of nutrition altogether, and then a lot of the current nutrition was based off of studies that were, I guess, the current nutrition dogma that comes from the various different mystics that we'll call it come from studies that were either in rats or small sample size or whatever the situation was, and
or a small sample of rats.
Yeah, or a small sample of rats eating an ungodly amount of a particular thing, and they kind of cherry pick different topics, and now you guys are really starting to look at kind of the macro body of evidence when it comes to nutrition, and really tying it together and making it more clear for people.
We didn't really see another way. Mm-hmm. Certainly not another way for us. There's only one question that has to be asked before your process is guaranteed of which way you're going to go. The question is, do you want the best results? Mm-hmm. If the answer is yes, then you're going to use science. Name anything that has given good results over and over without science and precision. Mm-hmm. When they launch the space shuttle, when they launch, various rockets into space, do you think they guess about the parameters of the diameters of various components? Do you think they guess about the trajectory? Like, they have one engineer there who just kind of knows a lot of shit, and they're like, well, Frank says it's 0.7 millimeters.
Yeah, so we're running on that. All $12 billion.
Totally, right? And they just really don't do that. And, in much the same way, with dieting and training, we have the same approach at RP, that number one is we use really advanced science, all the science we can. And number two, we distill that science into practical recommendations so that people can just do stuff. And if they ever want to know what it's based on, we can always explain it. But if they don't really want to know, if they just want to be a specialist in whatever their field and just get the results, great, we've done that anyway. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, of course, leads us to the other half, the P in RP, which is periodization. So can you kind of elaborate on the concept of periodization and maybe a little bit of the science behind it, and then we can dive into some of the specific topics.
Totally. So periodization is the logical sequencing of multiple phases of action so that the end result is as good as it could possibly be. Mm-hmm. It is not simply the looking to an end result and taking a one-shot approach. Periodization is saying, what do I have to do now to set up something later, to get the best possible result at the end. Mm-hmm. That's why it's periodization. It's the use of periods, cycles of training or of eating or of any kind of other process. And every kind of process that you see in the modern world, and factory operation and everything, that is basically a form of periodization. Mm-hmm. Like when, the Ford Motor Company doesn't just build cars all the way from mined steel to a car in one place. They have a sequence of steps, and every step is designed to flow into the next. Why not give yourself the advantage of diet and training and use that periodized model as well? Mm-hmm. And there's a concept underlying periodization, which is very related to it, called phase potentiation. Phase potentiation is really, really simple. It's saying that one phase of diet and training should potentiate or improve the performance, set up good performance in the next phase. Mm-hmm. A really easy example for that is if you are trying to gain strength. What is the biggest underlying factor in strength? How do you know, walking on the street, how do you guess pretty well that someone's strong? How jacked they are, right? Mm-hmm. How much muscle they have.
Size, yeah.
Totally, of course. So in periodization, as opposed to being I'm kind of training for sort of size/strength, because you find out that size is a big deal for strength, you think, okay, I got to get bigger, but I also have to get stronger, so you kind of train for both. Mm-hmm. Phase potentiation says, why don't you put the muscle on first? Once you have the muscle, you can take that muscle and make it stronger. Mm-hmm. And then, at the end of that, you're both jacked and strong. But you've done it in two distinct phases. Because it's better than stage one thinking or step one thinking. You're not just caveman style, goal, action, just walk right to it. You think, what do I have to do to set up to get to the next stage, because some goals are really hard. Dieting is really tough. Mm-hmm. Training is really tough. And to get the best result, you have to work in smaller steps to set up the big steps that will get you where. It's if a mountaineer, or they don't use that, look at me using 1920s term. Man, I'm a mountaineer, see? What do they call now? Climbers?
Probably, yeah.
They unfroze me, recently. I haven't brushed up on the modern stuff. So, when a climber looks up at a really high peak, what kind of climber just starts going? Mm-hmm. Nobody. They think, okay, I'm going to need a certain amount of equipment to set up a base camp at a certain height. Mm-hmm. And if I take too much equipment, it's going to be overkill. If I take not enough, I can't potentiate my journey to the top. A big deal in especially super elite high mountain climbs is the use of potentiation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you get to a base camp and you literally have to acclimate to the altitude. And that potentiates your performance on the next part. And if you just think, I see Everest, I'm just going to climb this month.
Straight up, day.
I just gotta start walking. I'm the kind of person that's only motivated if I keep progressing, so I just have to climb Everest in one go. Good luck.
Yeah.
So potentiation in that response, or in periodization, is the taking the mountain, splitting it up into logical zones, and thinking, when am I gonna need breaks? What can I do at various ends of parts of the journey to make sure my performance in the next part and the part after that is enhanced?
Mm-hmm.
And in dieting, it's so let's talk about dieting for fat loss. You're essentially going from weighing maybe 300 pounds to weighing 200 pounds sustainably and healthy is like climbing Mount Everest. Mm-hmm. And for the number of people that have successfully pulled that off, it's probably statistically just about as likely as climbing Mount Everest, unfortunately, right? Because of so many impediments.
Yeah.
So if you want to give yourself the best chances of success, are you going to climb it in one go? Are you going to just go off 300 or 200? Well, no way, right?
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
It's very unlikely. So what do? You set up various base camps along the way. And what that means is you understand that there are going to be some changes as you diet, and you're going to have to take some phases to erase those changes to give yourself a clean slate. Mm-hmm. As you diet, as you lose fat, a couple of not so cool things happen. You develop what we like to call diet fatigue. That means your metabolism starts to slow. Your voluntary and involuntary energy expenditure starts to go down. You move around less. Mm-hmm. And a lot of calorie burning every day is just fidgeting and stuff like that, playing on your phone, getting up, getting down. Like sometimes you can't sit in your seat for too long. Mm-hmm. If you're really dieted down, you can sit in your seat for forever and you don't care. So that kind of stuff starts to lower your metabolism, lowers how many calories you burn. Your actual metabolism starts to slow down. Really, really bad news. After that happens enough, hunger starts to go up. Cravings start to go up. Mm-hmm. That basically means now we have two things going on. In order to counteract your slowing metabolism, we have to decrease food intake that much more. But hold up, your hunger's going up too. Oh my God, that means it's that much harder to eat that much less food. If that's really stuff that's bothering you, if that stuff that's really picked up speed when you go from 300 to 200, if that stuff's really bothering you at 270 pounds, and the analogy with the mountain is, if your feet are already sore 1/3 of the way up to Mount Everest, do you really think you're going to put your ice boots on and climb all the way to the top some number of hundreds of thousands of meters later? Mm-hmm. With the way you're feeling now? No way. In just the same way, when you are developing a ton of that diet fatigue, you think, man, what's it going to be like at 200? Really bad. But the good news is that you can take a phase, so after an initial cutting phase or fat loss phase, let's say you go from 300 to about 270 pounds, mm-hmm. Periodization would say, okay, now you need a phase to set up the next good progressive phase of fat loss dieting. Mm-hmm. Well, what do? You might take a maintenance phase. Just like a climber would get to a camp and set up a base camp, mm-hmm. get used to the altitude. The first day, their feet hurt from the big climb to the base camp, and the altitude's really rough. Just the same way, you're really tired of dieting, and your body's really not used to that body weight, so it still has these really big hunger cravings. Spend a couple days at base camp, all of a sudden the air feels pretty thick to you, mm-hmm. and you're breathing it pretty well. And your sores on your feet healed and stuff like that, and your calves aren't cramping anymore, and you feel pretty good. And you look up at that mountain, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, it doesn't seem that bad. Next step. Totally. Yeah. And even psychologically, there's some you're tired after climbing. You're like, I don't want to climb anymore.
And I feel like compartmentalizing that next step, okay, this is the end goal, as opposed to, I think a lot of people, when they get into dieting, they think, okay, I'm just going to have to do this perpetually forever until the end of time. Huge. And that is very discouraging. I mean, you look into that and you're like, oh my God, I'm really going to be dieting, eating chicken and broccoli for the entire rest of my life.
And you know what? There's a big conflation, and Dr. Melissa Davis talks about this all the time. There's a big conflation between dieting to lose fat and the strategies you take to do that, and healthy living, mm-hmm. a balanced, healthy life. Mm-hmm. Don't conflate those two. Dieting is supposed to suck.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it sucks a little less so long as you're progressing. But maintenance is not supposed to suck. And healthy living doesn't look like chicken breast and broccoli all the time. It looks like it's some of the time and a bunch of different kind of foods to make sure that you're living an awesome life, because what's the point of getting down to 200 pounds if you're just going to be miserable down there? Mm-hmm. There's no point in that.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely correct. It really does pay psychologically to just look at the next goal and forget about the long journey. You have it in the back of your mind. Don't worry, it's not going anywhere. Look at the next long goal. Don't, when you're walking up to the base camp and you see base camp 600 meters away and you're like, oh, that's pretty close. Don't look up at the mountain and be like, oh, God, look at that thing. There's like people falling off of it and ice chunks and stuff. And you can't even see the top because it's a little above the clouds. And you're like, who am I to attempt this journey? 600 meters. And you've got tons of rest, tons of food. And you, by the time that the question comes up, can I climb this mountain again? You'll have a new goal that won't seem that crazy anymore. You say, well, I've already been living at base camp, which is like 18,000 feet up already. What's another 600 feet here, 500 feet? Totally. Just the same with dieting. Get to 270 pounds. Stay there. We recommend for just as long as it took you to get there. Maybe 3 months that it took you to get from 300 to 270. It's a pretty good clip. And then stay at 270 for 3 months. After 3 months at 270, slowly but surely, your daily levels of hunger start to fall off. Your daily expenditure of energy starts to go up. You're not like a real vegetable anymore. You start moving around. Pretty close to the end of those 3 months for most people. And if you need more time, take it. You're going to start to feel very normal. And it helps to be in touch with yourself psychologically. Take some time to yourself. Ask yourself, am I ready? Am I excited about another fat loss attempt? If the answer is, don't do it. If you're like, oh my God, restrictions, oh no. But we've all been there in that point, I think, when your friends are like, hey man, getting a cheat meal tonight, what do you want? And you're like, nothing. Can't we just eat chicken and broccoli? You get sick and tired of eating tasty food. You just had it so much. Donuts after a while taste the same. If you're in that position after 3 months of maintaining, which is totally reasonable, then you'll feel like somebody asks you, like, hey, what do you think about dieting? You'll be like, let's burn it up. You know, like when you feel I'm getting leaner now, so I can't really pinch a lot off, but when you feel like you're fat and you're like, ugh, get off of me, and you're like super motivated to diet, and you look at food and you're like, whatever, I want to diet. When you want to diet, that stuff starts to come back. The psychology of it starts to come back after a couple months. If you do 2 weeks and you lie to yourself, 2 weeks of maintenance, that's like an hour at base camp. You've taken your shoes off,
you're like,
you ate a meal, you're like, I'm good
to
to go. You got to examine deeply and say, am I really good to go? And the answer is probably not. Take the time you need. And that's another really quick thing, if I could mention, we could probably do a whole nother chat on this. If health is the concern, if you want to be healthy and live a long time and see grandkids and spouses and all that stuff, outside of really extreme medical circumstances, which don't worry, the doctors will take care of you then anyway. They'll do medical weight loss for you at a restricted hospital site. Unless you're in that situation, there's almost never a time to rush weight loss. You can say, and we have an analogy in the book, for the book we got coming out on nutrition and health, if you take only 6 months to get down to your healthy weight, but it's a burner diet, and you've got no motivation at the end, and you just bounce right back up over the next year and a half to your old weight, how much total time at a lean and healthy weight did you spend? Like a couple weeks? And on average, you spent maybe, let's say you went from 300 or 200 and then back to 300. Your average weight was 250. So that couple of years or year and a half or whatever, your average weight was 250, which means your average health detriment was somebody with a 250 pound frame would have. Not as good as 200, not nearly, better than 300, but it's only 2 years. So when you die at age 45 or whatever, like if you've never pound your whole life, that probably is when you're going to die. When you die, let's say age 50, it's going to have been, some sum total of 30 years you lived in an adult life at 300 pounds. And you could have lived, only till 48, but you bought yourself 2 years because of 2 years you were at 250 instead. Okay, better than nothing. But how about this? Take 5 years to intelligently, long-term investment, get down to a sustainable 210 pounds. Forget about 200. Let's just say 210. I want to eat more donuts. Fine. So those 5 years, could you have gotten there quicker? Totally. But now, how long do you have to live? How much better is your quality of life at 210 pounds? You may die at 65 or 68 because years and decades add up much more than any one time. So if you have this, you're overweight, you're overfat, you have this idea in your head like, I've got to get rid of this now. No, you don't. You have to set up in a periodized, logical manner. Take steps, plenty of maintenance, plenty of base camps on the way up the mountain to make sure that you're setting up your biggest chances of success. Because nobody cares if you climb Mount Everest and didn't summit. Did you climb Mount Everest? No, but I went on a trip to Mount Everest once and tried to climb it. Slow clap for you. Great. Are you on that list of people who've summited? No. And if you tried to diet and you lost a shitload of weight, but you couldn't keep it off, same idea. Is it a really cool experience? Yes. Is it a health benefit to have dieted and come back? Yeah, probably. Because you spent, on average, less at 300 pounds. But the real kicker is take all the time you need. In years is okay. Multiple months of dieting and multiple months of breaks from diets in which you don't gain back, but you just stay. That's the way you set up decades of healthy living at lower body weights. That's the way to do it. I think, and that's where periodization comes in really handy. And again, that whole thing, periodization, is not just looking at goal, getting there. It's looking at goal, what multiple phases can I break this up into? What multiple phases are necessary to make sure that I have the best chances of actually getting to the goal.
Absolutely. So scientifically, you want to look at not only the mountain, but also, each phase moving up.
How do you step? Because how you feel after each phase is going to determine how that next phase goes. If you are down to 250 pounds and you have made some wrong decisions, you didn't take enough maintenance time, and you feel totally strung out and delirious, your chances of falling off the wagon are really high. We're all human. And you tell yourself there's more to life than these stupid diets, and I'm just going to be me, and I'll be 300 and whatever, I'll just be active. And there's a lot to say for that. Fundamentally, you could do better than that. You could be down to 210 or 220 and live a healthy and happy life just the same if you dope it out, for lack of a better term, to make sure you do the right things to set up the next thing. It can't all be about the end goal. It has to be about the steps that take me to my next goal.
Awesome.
And that's a lot of actually, maybe not in finance, but in corporate structure, the get-rich-quick scheme is a fool's errand.
Disaster. Break it up quarterly.
That's right. But, sometimes as a company, you have to do some serious investing and some serious structural stuff that won't get you a ton of money right away. You have expenses, but those expenses are investments in the future. It's just the same with fat loss dieting. If you try to go at it in one go, good luck. Most people fail. Almost everyone fails. If you break it up, you give yourself all the advantages.
Awesome. So now you guys know what the Renaissance and the periodization mean in Renaissance Periodization. They're both absolutely critical to the business philosophy, and one of the number one reasons we're so interested in partnering with the RP team over here at Trifecta. So we'll be back with more with Dr. Mike Israetel in a few minutes here on the psychology of dieting. Thanks, guys.